Hello everyone, Kurt over here and welcome back to another episode from Whole Federal Labs. Today we continue on with Fiore's manuscript of the Getty and the sword in two hands section, and we're going to be looking at the breaking of the point or the breaking of the sword. Now this is another play that's a continuation in regards to the exchange of thrust kind of concept if someone's thrusting at you. But in this case right here, instead of us both being on a plane where both the points are out, we're in a position where the student's hands are held high. This is what it said within the Getty, and the student throws a strike, fendente, which casts the sword off the side. We're also looking at different ways here in which the footwork, which he says to crest offline and then to pass, which allows us to achieve different ways of being able to constrain the sword, as well as the follow-on techniques that Fiore prescribes here, which contains with stepping on the blade, as well as where to strike the person, which is a continuation, as we see it, of the plays of Abrazari. So with that being the case here, let's take a look. Okay, so we're looking at the breaking of the thrust, which is, again, another concept that comes within the exchange. It's all off the play right here. And we're going to see once again here a continuation in which Fiore is talking about how, again, the methodology is to increase offline and then pass. Now, a little bit about that, after doing some of the other things right here in previous lessons and observations here, I've had a thought about that. Oftentimes we think increasing offline and then passing, right? Again, based off of how we see a cresamento, decresamento, passare, tornare, etc. But if the notion of a cresamento is just to basically get the gate between the legs to span wider and then to decrease, then increasing offline, although we may thinking this to this, it also might be this to this. So in other words, we're two-parting it here offline. So getting off the line here, shoot off the line here. So again, getting space in between. We're going to explore both of those options in the break today. But before we do that, I got a couple of Tollhofer Lichtenauers from Regenia here. And we're going to talk about a little bit about the anatomy, about what happens when we talk about striking the sword in the flat surface, because it has a different effect. So the big thing about this right here is that if the swords are out flat, what Mr. Connor's going to do is he's going to put both hands on the sword, and I'm going to hit along the edge, and I'm just going to crack this down right here. Just going to go like this, and he's going to resist that. Okay, so that's not the test. That's just me showing what's going to happen here. So he's going to resist it, and we can see how the sword, yes, it still goes down, but he's still maintaining this in the same kind of space. Now, if we flip the sword to the side, ready? Here we begin. We can see that there is a huge difference in what happens with the sword as it goes down this way, which is, again, this is another key indicator why there's four things that we can do with a sword besides just hitting and whatnot. And especially when it comes down to binding and or breaking, again, that's why we say if I strike in, so this is where, again, if I strike in and he binds at me, he comes into the edge, then he is choosing to cover into a bind. That's why those four words are not just one thing, they are considerable things. He can also use, if I come in right here and I thrust and he uses this right here to come over, he can also break this, but I can use the break to repel a strike, as we saw with Colpo Volano. But again, that right there just kind of talks about the anatomy. And again, swords vibrate as such, and that is dispersal of force and other things, and so those are vibrational nodes. And that right there is a way for us to disperse energy so that this right here, that strike that comes in, is not as thrown off. So if we use that dispersal thing, that means if I strike it this way, it's going to go in the direction of the vibration, which creates a devastating break. So for that right there, that's the first part we want to talk about with this. And then the next portion here, we're going to talk about the play itself, which is right here. Now, in this case, a big part about this is here, again, the whole notion here, again, is about he is thrusting. So whether he is thrusting in, if my hands are high, whatever, it doesn't matter here. Situation is going to dictate. So he thrusts in at me. This is what we're looking at right here. And we've already talked about exchanging to come in. We've talked also, because again, if I'm here, I can also offline, pass, and shift, which again, those become the same kind of concept. Offline, shift, that's your pass, there's your everything else, it allows you to get across. Those are the footwork pieces that we're talking about. In this one, however, the breaking of the thrust essentially is upon off the crossing. Now he right here, my hands are high, but we are also in crossing. If we come into this space and I have assumed the position of this and I'm going to make myself go into the play, right? As he thrusts in, coming off to come down. Now, this right here, again, depending on how everything else is set up. Now, the image, of course, shows him with his left foot forward on this. It doesn't matter here for this case right here. The point I'm trying to say is that essentially we come across with a break here, which allows us into mezza spada plays and everything else. And again, from here, if he tries to lift up with this, there is the edge line right here, which again gives the context what we talked about before about if I'm already on the ground, why is he going to do anything but strike the leg, because he's going to keep into the side here. He's already on the ground. So the breaking and the thrust gives gateway into perspective into other concepts too. But let's talk about the movement that goes into this, okay? And then also the considerations of, because even though we're talking about the breaking of the thrust, we're going to be talking about the other follow-on plays of this, which we think also has important relevance. So take a tap step back, please. So as he comes in with this right here, and again, if my hands are high, right? So if my hands are high, I'm going to come across with this. If we go off the premise of offline pass, right? Then it doesn't have to necessarily be, it could just be this, quick over, right? It could also be, because in that case right there, by shifting off and back, I'm allowing myself two ways of getting around this. One's going into the blade and one going away. The first one going forward, this right here, I'm going in with it, he goes up towards me. I've gone into the blade and I've crossed this. Now, whether the image is trying to get me to be back like this where I'm on the outside, or it's here, or maybe I've taken too big of a step, the point being is, as I'm right here over top, I now have access to his sword itself, to his hands, and to many other things that are possible here. Because on this crossing here, I also have the ability to step across. I'm not going to step on his sword because I don't want to break it, which allows me to go into the other plays, right? If I choose, and again, the footwork for this right here is just going 1-2 or 1-2. Either way, one's going forward and one's going back, which is why I think it's important to explore both. But again, if this is a real life or death situation, you may want to exercise on the portion of caution to get away from the blow, because that's going to put you away from the blade and therefore angle off on a spot. Because again, if I go into this blow, right, if I stop right here, one, couple things, the sword's very close to my leg, but two, if he's a savvy fighter, and he is, I've just given him my back. And now all this spot right here is all in that play. So instead, let's take a look here about also going to the other side. Again, that doesn't mean it's right or wrong, it just means things to be aware of. Hands are held high, he thrusts in, 1-2. Now I'm off to the side here. This, to me, makes much more the image where now I've gone to the other side of it all, and by increasing, because I'm going offline, and then passing back, allows me to get to this portion here, okay? So those are some important pieces right here to understand that when we look at as far as on the person right here. It also makes me consider the for terminology, because up until this point, a lot of times I talk about ritornare being the thing to return, but that could also just be coming up to bring right back into the place. Regardless, the point being here is by shifting offline, we allow ourselves to get ourselves behind the blade and away from them as far as for grappling concerned. In that space, we go to the next play right here, which looks like this. And this is where Fiore is talking about striking to the back of the beard. Now, interestingly enough on this, if we look at how he is standing, the sword is almost behind him like this, the opponent. So somehow, some way, in the break, we'll go into it. I've come here, and it makes me wonder if he's, in stepping on it, is he stepping across this way, which turns the arm? It's hard to do here on the concrete floor. By coming this way over top to create the arm to go that way, as we see here within this structure. And mind you, I know I'm fumbling about here, but again, I actually don't want to step on the sword to break it. And that by coming over top with this right here, it's not necessarily stepping in here, because that keeps his upper body structure where it needs to be, where he could ditch the sword and do anything right here and actually just come straight at me. So instead, by coming over here, stepping in and stepping across over top, again, hard to do. So this way here, so I create his arm to be in this shape, where again, it kind of puts in that third master concept. Because again, it's not concrete we're going to be doing this with. You might be burying the sword into the ground. It might be you just slam to the ground and you're just trying to step on the blade to snap it. Regardless, it doesn't matter. The area where Fiore tells us to strike is the same we've talked about before when it comes down to apprezzare, which is behind the beard section right here. And from that spot, as we break this down, again, whether I'm over here and I've stepped out this way and I come straight back up, again, this is a really nasty spot to hit, right? So coming over here, right back in, strike to the back, straight in the back right there. If I step him across, just make the shape as over, and I'm here with it, my blade's on top, I still have the same optimal ability to move in with it. Regardless, the lessons here that are key in point to me are not just necessarily to hit the guy, it's to hit him effectively, but also stop his return. Stop him from doing the thing that may actually get him to respond in this by striking back up. Because here's the deal. In this case, I'm going to step off to the right here. As he comes in with this, 1, 2, if I just go straight up, oh shit response is here. He can grapple right here. His oh shit response maybe to windshield wipe and hit me right in the face. So we have this kind of concept right here. Or he might just come up with a falso at me. So just come straight up here. So that we end up hitting each other on that. Again, why are we stepping? It goes down to, I tell people in class, cover, stifle, turn. Okay? The next image which we see right here, again, it's something you can strike him or stab him in the face. Again, this is nothing new or different. I think this has to deal with, again, him trying to say the distance of the sword is a portion here to be considered with, which we'll be seeing here in other plays later on. So again, crossing in with this, over top, 1, 2, I'm over, step, and this is the other option I can do here. I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, and I think the reason why you have two of those plays side by side to each other, which are essentially saying the same thing, is the length of your sword is really going to be dependent upon this. If this is really long and I can't thrust him right in the face or hit him on top of the head as easily, then just coming over and smacking him along the side is enough to do what you want him to do. If this is shorter, maybe this is a shorter device that I have over here in my hand, I might have the ability to come over the top here and then just bring it straight up and top there. Ultimately, the point being here is it's targeting, it's talking about striking to the back of the beard, stabbing to the throat, knowing the tool that you have here, constraining the person's sword that's in the place here, and then also, as always, offline movement to passing or offline to passing, which allows you to get away. In my experience, I personally like a lot of this play right here because it keeps the sword away. Remember, even if you are in armor, getting stuck with this is not a good time. So keeping it far away as possible. Same thing with like knife fighting, either going into it and constraining them or hollowing out and keeping away. The whole point there is you have two modes of getting into it. Into or away, contain, constrain, and then work to maintain the line that you've got there. And that concludes what we have here for this interpretation here when it comes down to the breaking of the thrust and the following plays of coming up to strike, either the guy of the beard, strike to the face, or the thrust. So as you can see with the video, this is quite a lot right here that we're covering here. It's technically three plays, but the reality is, in my eyes, this is just a continuation of a concept that we've continuously seen throughout his manuscript, which is to contain, restrain, and so that you can maintain your action afterwards. But the part about this video right here, so if you've watched a lot of this for a long time here, you know that my interpretation of footwork, passare and ritornare, are just inverse operations of directions. This play here has actually got me thinking that ritornare may be something entirely different, and there may be follow-on videos that follow about that. But regardless of this right here, we looked at the two ways in which creasing offline here and then passing, either going into it or going away from it, which I believe is ultimately what Fiore's two ways of practice is. You can contain and move in, or you can constrain by moving out to play into different directions. And both are viable, especially when you have to consider how the person is moving against you. The part right here that also comes down to where, about the striking of the person. Some factors that are may or may not be actually really considered out there is, like, first and foremost, how thick are the shoes that you're wearing of the time, and depending on the era and manufacturing and everything else. The thing about this is that they may not be as robust as we think. We don't know if they're specified. If there was, one, they seem to wear up and they survive the elements as well as walking in everyday use. And the reason why I say this is important to look at is because when we talk about stepping on the blade, again, you saw how, again, I didn't want to step on the sharpshooting that Connor had, because essentially I don't want to snap his sword in place. But the part about this is, if I look at the images that I'm looking right now, it looks like he's stepping across the flat of the sword. And to me, that's a very important thing, because essentially there are other hidden things in here. As I said, I don't think it's just putting the sword to the ground. We're on concrete in a space right there that does the demonstration. But this could very well be, I've slammed your sword point into the earth, and now your sword is stuck in the ground. And that might be another factor in which we are not necessarily looking at. So if the sword is bent into the ground, that means that off the constraint is right here. One, they have to pull it out. Two, they have to, now I have the way to be able to step on it in any direction, which allows me to contain the sword even more, which goes to the follow-on techniques. The arc line that happens once I've made that is that essentially it is straight down, right back up. And again, Fiore talks about where to strike a sultani behind the beard or into the face. Both of those are viable solutions. And whether you are striking back up or you're coming back down with a strike here, that just tells me that Fiore wanted to be complete in this, and that perhaps also he's looking at the length of your sword. So remember, in other plays right here, we talk about, tutto porti ferro, which Fiore states is good for a shorter, good quality sword, or mezza porti ferro, which favors a longer sword. Again, these are parts right here that I do think that Fiore is giving situational awareness practices here that he understands for himself that may be important to look at. And in this case right here, if you have a longer sword against somebody, the striking, you might hit them with the mezza spada. Not that that's not going to be a bad day for them. But again, if we're talking about max capacity so that you can get more options out of your blade work, then I wonder if he's also making the comment, strike here or come right back down and hit the person in the face or thrust in the face because of difference in your sword length. So just some food for thought out there. Again, it's hard, more things to consider and whatnot. So with that being the case here, that's going to do it for this video here. Don't forget, please like, subscribe, share with a friend out there, and please leave a comment below. Don't forget, hit the bell to be notified when new content drops out there. And we'd love to have you on this 14th century journey here of Fiore's Art of Arms. And I want to grow this channel, and that's not possible without viewers like you. So please come and join us. And thank you for stopping by. And as always, dear viewers, please stay safe out there, train well, and fight on. I'll see you all soon.